Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing fine. My name is Pooja Dwivedi. Welcome to my class, The Daily Current Affairs. You know how we say important questions on a daily basis from the perspective of UPSC based on current affairs. Explanation important for both prelims as well as mains examination and thereafter the interviews. So you have to attend these classes on a daily basis. Do not worry about notes. I provide it through my Telegram channel, Pooja Dwivedi UPSC. If you have any queries regarding this examination, do talk to me on my Instagram. Follow me on my threads. So these are the various events that we have to cover today. I asked a question for practice. Many of you have answered it correctly, but most of you have also answered it incorrectly. Consider the following statements. Mangroves are salt-tolerant trees and shrubs typical of estuarine and intertidal region. Then the Sundarbans, the largest contiguous mangrove forest in the world, completely lies in India. And mangrove represents a boreal forest ecosystem. So what do we have to see? How many of the statements given above is or are correct? First of all, you have to remember that mangroves are salt tolerant. Their roots and their shrubs can tolerate the presence of salt water. And that is why they are littoral type and not boreal type of forest. So that makes the third statement to be incorrect, but first is correct. Also, the Sundarbans are of course the largest contiguous mangrove forest in the world, but they completely do not lie in India. They also lie in Bangladesh. Okay, so that makes the first statement correct. 2 and 3 are not correct. 1 only will be the correct answer. Mangroves are salt-tolerant trees and shrubs. They are typical of the estuarine and intertidal regions. They have breathing roots and they also have waxy and succulent leaves given the atmosphere they are in. And they are also flowering plants. That means they produce flowers. As you can see, these are the roots of the mangroves. Mangroves represent a littoral forest ecosystem. That means they thrive in brackish water in coastal regions, and the Sundarbans lie both in India as well as Bangladesh. As you can see, it is traversing the boundary of India and Bangladesh. That is why that statement wasn't correct. But other than this, in many other regions of India, in many other states of India also, we find the mangroves, such as Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, then we have Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat. Of course, the very important one. We have to remember. Sometimes in pairs, questions can be asked. So remember the Bhitarkanika region in Odisha, Sundarbans, West Bengal, Bhitarkanika, Odisha. These kind of questions could be asked. That is why I tell you to remember the names. Consider the following pairs kind of question could be given. They also act as bioshields. Whenever there is an issue such as a tropical cyclone, if we remember Cyclone Amphan, the Sundarbans of West Bengal helped West Bengal in order to tackle Cyclone Amphan. So that is why it is important to remember they also act as bioshields, guarding against coastal soil erosion as well, primarily because of their roots. Their roots are so strong in nature, pulling all the soil together. Moving on, consider the following statement. Statement 1 says, the increase in cyclone activity in the Arabian Sea is tightly linked to the rising ocean temperatures and increased availability of moisture under global warming. I have covered this particular topic in detail in today's class, so make sure you watch that. For a cyclone to originate, there is a need of a large mass of water with a temperature of at least 26.5 degrees Celsius. Choose the correct answer using the following codes. In the recent times, it has been seen that Arabian Sea is becoming more and more warmer, and that is why it is able to give that amount of heat and moisture for a tropical cyclone to develop. So whenever there will be a large mass of water that is present with sustained temperature of 26.5 degrees Celsius and above, it will be able to produce winds that ascend, taking moisture with it, creating approximately 10 kilometers of vertical in length clouds. And when these clouds provide moisture, provides condensation, this entire system that develops, ascending warm air and descending cooler air, it becomes a self-sustaining system, and hence it becomes a cyclone. So remember that these kind of questions could be asked on the basis of concept. Concept I have completely cleared in one of my classes today. Do watch that. Other than this, the first statement is correct, because we are seeing that there is an increase in cyclonic activities in the Arabian Sea. First is correct and second is also correct. So statement 1 is correct and it is correctly explaining statement 2 and 1 both are correct, but statement 2 is the correct explanation of statement 1, because there is a necessity of a large mass of sustained heat water of at least 26.5 degrees Celsius and above, and that is being possible for the Arabian Sea in the Indian Ocean. So yes, both the statements are correct, and statement 2 is the correct explanation of statement 1. B will be the correct answer, and I have already told you about cyclone Tej. Please watch that. I'm saying it time and again because conceptual clarity is needed in these kind of questions. You will be able to understand it from here. We are actually experiencing twin cyclones, two cyclones at once in the Indian Ocean. One is Cyclone Tej, that is supposed to make a landfall in the Arabian Peninsula between Yemen and Oman, and another one is Cyclone Hamoon. Hamoon has been given its name by Iran, Tej by India. I have also covered how do we name cyclones. Okay, that is why this question has been asked. Cyclones are named differently in different parts of the world. As you can see, in Atlantic Ocean, West Atlantic Ocean, hurricane. In East Pacific Ocean also hurricane. In West Pacific Ocean, typhoon. Cyclone, it is named so in the any region of Australia, east or west. And then cyclonic storm or tropical cyclones. Why they are called tropical cyclones? Because they occur between the tropics, Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn. The sea surface temperatures over the Arabian Sea increased by 1.2 degrees Celsius to 1.4 degrees Celsius in recent decades, and in a Nature Journal, in a journal by the name of Nature, in 2021 that studied the Arabian Sea between 1982 to 2019, said that there is a significant increasing trend in the intensity. Cyclones are becoming more intense in nature. They are occurring more frequently, more times, and also the duration is large of cyclonic storms as well as very severe cyclonic storms. There is a 52% increase in the frequency of cyclonic storms in the recent epoch from 2001 to 2019 in the Arabian Sea, while there is a decrease of 8% in the Bay of Bengal. So Bay of Bengal seemingly is becoming cooler as compared to the Arabian Sea. That means India needs to change its strategy because we have a huge coastline which is very vulnerable in nature now. And there is an 80% increase in the total duration of cyclones in the Arabian Sea during the last 2 decades. Moving on. The duration of very severe cyclones has also increased by 260%. The change in the Arabian Sea's character has led to more severe cyclones forming and also sustaining over. With reference to the procedure for raising questions in Lok Sabha, consider the following statements. The procedure for raising question is governed by the Representation of People's Act of 1952. A member is allowed to give up to 15 notices of questions both for oral and written answers. Start questions have to be submitted at least 10 days in advance. So how many of the statements given above is or are correct? No. Rules and procedures of the Lok Sabha tells us about what, how and what is the procedure of raising questions in the Lok Sabha. See, recently we saw that Mohua Mitra's break. See, recently we saw that Mahua Mitra has been going through a lot of issue when it comes to raising questions, as in it has been alleged that she has been taking money and lavish gifts from Hiranandani in order to raise questions about the Adanis in the Lok Sabha. And this is one of the major concerns. So there is a need for procedure, right? So the procedure for raising questions is not governed by the Representation of People's Act of 1952. A member is allowed to give up to not more than 5 notices, okay, for both oral and written answers. Start questions have to be submitted at least 15 days in advance, both starred and unstarred, okay. So first is incorrect, second is also incorrect, third is also incorrect, none are correct. The procedure for raising questions is governed by Rule 32 to 54 of the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business in Lok Sabha. Direction 10 to 18 of the direction of by the Speaker, Lok Sabha is also there. To ask a question, an MP, Member of the Parliament, may first send a notification to the lower house's Secretary General. So remember, first we have to send it to the Secretary General, in which we have to mention what is the content of the question, what kind of question do we want to ask, the formal name of the minister to whom the question is addressed, that means to whom we have to ask this, the day on which the answer is required, and the order of preference as well. That means if any question wants to be answered first, last, second, in this manner. If the MP tables more than one notice of question for the same day, these are normally included in the notice, and a member is allowed to give not more than 5 notices for the question, both oral and written. And there are 4 different types of questions: starred, unstarred, no short notice questions, and questions which are addressed to private members. That means those members who are not ministers. Okay. A start question is asked by an MP and answered orally by the minister in charge. Okay, remember, start question and orally. Each MP is allowed to ask one start question per day. Another important facet, start questions have to be submitted at least 15 days in advance when a question is answered orally. Of course, if any question is answered orally, there is a provision for asking supplementary questions as well, follow-up questions. Okay, moving on. An unstart questions receives a written reply. Start is oral, unstart is written. Similarly, 15 days notice is here also is there. Unlike start questions, unstart questions don't permit any follow-up question. You cannot write time and again to the minister. Okay. Short notice questions are pertaining to those kind of issues that are very important for the public, and they can be asked with less than 10 days notice. Remember that. Moving on. It is a United Nations treaty that sets some common principles and terms on how countries must treat each other's diplomatic representatives in order to ensure friendly relations and maintain proper communication channels between countries. So, which of the conventions is the paragraph referring to? We are right now we are not having a very good relationship with Canada. Both these countries are dismissing each other's diplomats, and there is a convention that guides all this. This is the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations 1961. Alright, so amid the ongoing standoff between India and Canada, Canada government announced it has recalled 41 diplomats posted in India and their family members because they were in danger of having their diplomatic immunity stripped off. And Canada is saying that India has done it unilaterally without consulting us, but that is not the case, as according to External Affairs Minister. So the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, it's a United Nations treaty which sets some common principles and terms on how countries must treat each other's diplomats. And the biggest point to take here is the diplomatic immunity, which is a privilege of exemption. That means the general rules which apply to Indian citizens do not apply to them, such as exemption from any sort of taxes, also certain laws, so that they can practice their diplomacy without any fear or favor or ill will. And it flows from two conventions. First is Vienna Convention and the 1961 Convention, and the Convention on Consular Relations 1963. Alright. So the 1961 Convention, according to Article 29, says that the person of a diplomatic agent shall be inviolable. He shall not be liable to any form of arrest or detention, and the receiving state must treat them with utmost respect so that they can perform their duties. And then there is Article 9, which says that it is up to the receiving state that if they want to make sure that any diplomat is welcomed or not. That is according to Article 9. Then Article 11, which has been cited by our own ministry, says that in the absence of specific agreement as to the size of the mission, as in, if I have 11 diplomats in Canada, I must also ensure that I have 11 diplomats here of the Canadian descent. The receiving state may require that the size of the mission must be kept within limits considered by it to be reasonable and normal. So this has been cited. Okay, moving on. Consider the following: optimum utilization of natural resources, production in organic farming increases especially during first few years, reduces the risk of crop failure, and reduces human and animal health hazard. So how many of the above is our advantage of organic farming? Organic farming is a process in which chemical fertilizers, synthesizers, and other sort of artificial things are not used. And that is one of the major issues when it comes to production in organic farming. For first few years, it declines. So this is not an advantage. Other than this, natural resources are used at an optimum level. Also, it reduces the risk of crop failure because the kind of farming that we do in organic farming becomes self-sustaining in nature, enough for itself. And it also reduces animal and human hazards, such as usage of pesticides. It can also lead to severe diseases in humans as well as animals. So for this issue to be solved, it is necessary for the government to provide incentives during the first few years so that the farmers can remain motivated in order to continue with organic farming. Okay, so 1, 3 and 4, 3 only will be the correct answer. Union Minister of Cooperation has said that all over 2 crore farmers will be involved in organic farming before 2027 in the country, because our ministers, of course, the government wants to reduce the subsidies for fertilizers. We have to ensure that food is through organic farming, the food which is available in the market is healthy in nature and also it is not taking a toll on the public exchequer. So organic farming is a production system which avoids or largely excludes the usage of synthetically compounded fertilizers, pesticides, growth regulators, any genetically modified organism and livestock food additives. It wants to rely upon crop rotations, usage of crop residues, annual manures, legumes, green manures, off-farm organic waste. So when we use these many things, it becomes organic in nature. Organic manure, this is a problem. I'm showing you the limitations. We all know the advantage. But UPSC can sometimes ask us to critically examine something. That means to be critical of something, to do criticism. So you have to remember the limitations as well. So organic manure is not abundantly available, first of that. Also, these are pretty expensive in nature. So this is one issue. Production in organic farming declines especially during the first few years because generally the soil is dependent on certain sort of artificial additives. So if we are not giving it to the soil, it becomes hard for the farmer to continue. The guidelines for organic production, processing, transportation and certification are beyond the understanding of the very common farmer. So it is necessary for the government to ensure that voluntary education is given to them, awareness is given to them about it. Marketing of these kind of produce, how it should be done is also not clear. Moving on. Consider the following statements. Statement 1 says the electronic voting machines are neither hackable or nor can work when tampered with. Then the EVMs are a part of the secure internet connection, which ensures whenever they are hacked, the Election Commission of India will stop their working. Choose the correct answer using the following codes. The first statement is definitely correct. That whenever we are thinking about the usage of EVMs, many political parties allege that these are tampered with, but the chip is programmable only one time. So the chip, whenever it is tampered with, EVMs cannot work. The first statement is definitely correct. And do you know they are not hackable because they are not at all connected to the internet. Here it is written, it is a part of the secure internet connection. No, it is not at all connected to the internet. That is why it is not hackable in nature. Statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is not correct. The EC is firmly against roping in private manufacturers in increasing the production capacity for EVMs. Because recently we may go for, there is a report that suggests that we may go for one nation, one election. And that means large number of EVMs have to be produced. But Election Commission is saying, I'm not going to give this work to any sort of private organization. So in 1977, for the first time ever, the concept of using EVMs came into existence. And then ECIL Hyderabad was given this duty to produce EVMs. And later on, Bharat Electronic Corporation was also roped in. In 1982, Kerala's election, for a point of time it was used, but it was struck down by the court. In 1989, there was a change that was made in the Representation of People's Act of 1951. Then it was conducted in MP, Rajasthan and Delhi, and finally in the Lok Sabha elections of 2004. One is the control unit, one is the balloting unit. These both are interactive with one another. The balloting unit consists of the names of the political parties for which you have to vote and the symbols also. And that is why we have to ensure that we produce them at a rate so that EVMs, because they are very secure in nature, they can't be tampered with, they cannot be hacked, they cannot be misused in any sort of way. That is why the government has to come up with a plan in order to increase its production. Consider the following places: Kotturu, Bavikonda, Sankaram, Totlakonda. So how many of the places given above is or are Buddhist sites? You have to tell me in the comment segment. Also, let me take the names of those students who have answered my last question correctly. Bear with me a moment. One was correct. Simran has answered it correctly. Vijay, Devi has answered it correctly. Vaishali has also answered it correctly. Oh, thank you so much, Vaishali. Also give my namaste to auntie. Komal has answered it correctly. Abhishek has answered it correctly. Prabhat, Mansi, Preeti, Swati, Priyadarshan, Padmashri. Thank you, Gyan. Rohit, Ritu. Thank you, Abul. Nityanand, Daydream, Suresh, Unnati. Sanjay has also given us the explanation. Very good. Param, thank you so much for answering the last question. Answer this one as well. We'll see you in the next class.